Welcome to Women Entrepreneurs Radio with your host, Deborah Bailey. When I started this podcast in 2008, I was on a mission to promote women business owners, creatives, and entrepreneurs. In each episode, my guests provide resources, valuable tips, and inspiration. Women Entrepreneurs Radio is about showing women how to harness their natural strength to achieve success on their own terms. Hi everyone, this is Deborah, and this show is going to be the beginning of a mini series, you could call it, where I'm talking about ways that authors can use some other types of media to help to promote themselves and to do some marketing, because I think it's really important to share that. And I've had authors on the podcast before, but I also know that a lot of entrepreneurs, business people, professionals also have an interest in writing books, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, or maybe they already do. And marketing and building an author brand really is a big part of what people have to consider when they're working on, publishing, particularly self-publishing, and getting their books out there. So even if you have a traditional contract, from what I understand, because I don't have one, so I'm not speaking from experience there, but I believe that you really still have to promote in some way and get the word out about what you're doing. So this is not something that's just for self-publishers, but it also could be for anyone who is wanting to get their book out there and really wanting to establish themselves and establishing their author brand. So I'm going to start this show talking about podcasting, which is a great fit, right? for how to use podcasting as an author. And I've presented this before online as a course for authors to just be introduced to it, to see if this is something that will work for them. And, obviously it's not going to work for everybody. Everybody's not really going to want to do this. But I think in some cases it really is a fit, and it is another way to market that may not be something that people think about immediately. Because I think right now, particularly since podcasting blew up over the past couple of years, it's kind of been viewed in different ways. Some people just look at podcasting itself as a business model or career or whatever, however you want to frame it, as opposed to using it as something to promote and market if you're doing some other kind of thing. If you're an author, if you're a speaker, or, some other kind of business owner, or, just an individual really wants to get your ideas out there or enjoys talking or interviewing other people. So, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are a business owner or entrepreneur to have a podcast, but I think that in some ways people may believe that it's, not something that they really could use and could make use of, let's say, for promoting other things that they're doing. So with that said, I really want this to be a little introduction to the courses I gave. And another reason why I'm doing that as well is because I'm currently in the process of taking some of the courses that I've presented over the years and putting them into PDF format and uploading them. And I will have a link to that site on, in the show notes. But what I'm doing is taking some courses I presented in terms of marketing and building an author brand, and also, of course, writing, particularly fiction writing courses where people can learn some craft skills and how they can apply them to their writing. So since I'm in the process of putting those together and I already have some courses uploaded, I figured, this would be a great way to introduce what I'm doing. But since, for the most part, I've often used this podcast for business type things or entrepreneurial things, this would be a great place to start off talking about the author branding types of things that we can consider. So that's what took me to talk about podcasts today. All right. So, first of all, I think a lot of times that people hear podcasting, and most people at this point, I'm hoping, kind of understand what that is. If you're listening to this, more than likely, you understand what a podcast is. And, this is something that's had an evolution over many years. And, originally when I remember first hearing about it, it was called internet radio, because I guess that was really how people looked at it. They were trying to find a way to define it. And that seemed to be the thing that fit. But then, of course, after iTunes and the iPod and all that kind of thing, then, it became something associated with that. So it was podcasts, after the whole iPod and all that branding went on. Then I think people started to understand what a podcast was. You didn't really have to explain it as much as I think that you did maybe, 10 years ago or so, So at this point, people may have a concept, though everybody may not really listen to them or really understand the point of them. And a lot of podcasting, has a certain, I can't say a certain look to it, because that's not what I mean. But I mean, people think about podcasts, they may just think about, podcast bros, quote unquote, who are doing podcasts, or people just talking about sports or talking about certain topics. But they really don't know that there's just about any topic that can be discussed on a podcast. It's not just one type of person doing them. It's not just talking about one type of thing. It's pretty wide open. So hopefully, if you're an author who's thinking about different ways to market and brand yourself, that, you may consider this if you haven't already. Again, is the point of what I want to share today, to, just kind of put this out there for you to consider. So as far as, starting a podcast, I think a lot of times people think, well, I'm going to have to spend a lot of money, and this is really going to be something that maybe I really can't afford, or I don't understand how to do it. And I think those are reasonable ways to think, because of just the whole idea of it. A lot of times when you see people talking about podcasts, they got the microphones and this and that and the other, and you're thinking, wow, that's something that's out of my reach, particularly if you don't have the money for equipment, or you really don't feel like you want to dive into the technology. So it's really going to look like something that, not for me, because obviously you have to have all this skill and knowledge. And it really isn't true. Not at all. I think that's more of the appearance of it than the truth of it. Because right now, for instance, since I'm doing this myself, I'm not interviewing anybody, I'm recording this on my phone. I have recording software on my phone, and that's what I'm right now, talking to. I'll just take this and upload it, so you really don't have to have all of that type of thing unless you want to. It's not a necessary thing that I have to have all this equipment, I've spent all this money, and I have the studio. Sure, people do, but you don't have to do that, particularly if you're just getting started and you just want to see, and this is something for you, because it may not be, and it's not for everyone, as I've mentioned. So don't let that stop you if you're interested in giving it a try. Now, another thing, let's kind of go on as to why you might want to do this. You could talk about being an author. You could talk about the behind the scenes, about, getting your ideas. It's a lot of times authors get asked about. You could talk about the things that you've done to prepare, research, if you want to go into that, or just about characters, settings, that kind of thing. You can also give writing tips. That's something that I've certainly considered, having some podcasts regarding some of the things I've covered in my courses. Just kind of sharing that, because you just never know, someone can use that information and they could apply that to their writing. And podcasting may be another way to get that information out there for folks, and also to let them know about, the courses that I have online. It's a way for me to market that too, Let's see. Also, you could read excerpts of your book. I had worked with an author a few years back who would have authors come on and read excerpts for like 20 minutes of their books. And it was really be a lot of fun because she was a really fun host. She was also an author. And so you go on and have a little chat and then, read a portion of your book. So that would really be entertaining and also be something to give readers an idea. I like the sound of that, or, I like to read that because I like what I'm hearing about this book, like literally hearing about this book. So don't underestimate the power of using your podcast for something just that basic. You could just say, well, here's my book and it's just out, or here's my work in progress. Here's a deleted scene. I'm going to share that with you. Things like that you would share otherwise. People may share those things in writing. So you don't necessarily have to do that. You could also share it, by audio. So consider that as a way to market books that you are working on or books that already are published. But you could also have interviews with other authors. That could be something a lot of authors have. I've noticed some author podcasts out there. A lot of them have interviews with other authors. They talk about different things regarding their genres. You could also talk to readers if you wanted to. I mean, what would be wrong with that? And just kind of have conversations with them or people in publishing in the industry. As I said, I've had interviews with authors. I've had interviews with authors who are also publishers. So that's something that helps you to make that connection with them. You have these conversations and you let people know, readers and writers, what goes on in terms of the whole process of writing and publishing and all that. So it can be very formative. It can be entertaining. And also ways for you to make connections with other people who also other writers and publishers and such. So these are also ways to promote. And you could say there could be ways to network as well. So I think they could be very helpful things to think about for you if you're not really sure what you may want to talk about. You don't have to do it alone. You don't have to do all the talking if you prefer not to. Excuse me. So that's just, a little bit of an idea of what you could do if you're interested in checking it out. But I think most importantly, when you start out, you really have to have a plan. And it doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out thing, but you really want to know, okay, if I'm deciding to do this, why am I doing this? What's my objective? Yes, it's also branding, marketing, promotions, that kind of thing. What else am I going to share? Probably make a list of those things so you can refer back to them, of course, as to what you want to talk about. If you plan to have guests when you start out, if you're at the point where you're like, yes, I'm ready to do something, I'm ready to put something out there, then look at what you want to call your show. More than likely, if you're an author, you're going to put your name in the name of the show. I think the authors that I have seen and, listen to some of those their shows, they have, put their name in some way in the title. So that, of course, is another way to promote them, promote what they're doing. So, that's something you want to consider. See what other names are out there. See what works for you, what feels good for you. And also keep in mind that when you're doing that, you're going to be using it particularly for you in promotions, or you're going to be inviting other people to be on, that kind of thing. Just keep that in the back of your mind, even if you're not sure when you start out with. Also, frequency of how often you see yourself doing this. It can be time consuming. which is, probably why at this point I'm not producing as many shows as I have in the past, because when you don't have all the time, it's kind of hard to do. Even if right now I'm doing shows of like around 30 or so minutes, but still, it does take time to set up. It takes time, especially if you're doing interviews. It takes time for you to do the editing, unless you're having someone else edit the shows. All of that, setting it up, having a conversation, that, even if it's a shorter show, it still takes time to do that. And then, of course, when you're done and you're posting and all that and the marketing, letting people know the show's out there, all of it is a time commitment. And it could be a commitment of actually doing all the things, excuse me, in terms of the editing and preparation and uploading, all of that is part of it. So unless you're having someone else do that for you, which you can do, then you want to consider that there is a time, there's time that you're going to spend in it. Even if you are doing something fairly basic and you're not spending a lot of money, there still is a time investment. So you may not want to do a show that's every week, particularly. You may consider not doing a weekly show, because it'd be like, okay, can I really fulfill that? And you don't have to. You may decide that, I can't really do a weekly show. Instead, I'm going to do bi-weekly, because that makes more sense to me. Or maybe I'll do a lot of shows, record them ahead of time. And then after I've done that, then I can put them together and put them out there one by one, let's say. So that way it's not a thing where you're having to record, let's say on a Monday, and try to upload on a Wednesday or something like that. You can do a bunch of them, batch them, and then post them as you go. And then see how that works for you. Excuse me, I'm just taking a little sip of something here. My throat was a little dry. So batching may be something that works better for you, where you just set aside time and say, well, I'm just going to record these things. And maybe it's 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, maybe it's half an hour. And then once I have all that together, then I can put them up one by one over a period of time. And you get to decide the timing, you get to decide the length, all of that. There really are no rules to say you must do it this way or that way. You really have to do what works for you, because if you don't, you're not going to continue. Or you really could say, I just want to do this for a limited time. I'm just going to do this for the remainder of the summer. I'm just going to do it for the fall. I'm just going to do it for a certain time when I'm doing a book launch or something of that nature. So that way you can have a beginning and an ending set in your mind as to what you're doing. So, and that may be less pressure. That's something else to consider as well. And then you could say, well, let me see how that went. And, I would really recommend that if you're not really sure. You want to do it, but you're not sure. I think that's something that you may want to try instead of leaving it open-ended. And you may also consider, as I mentioned before, having someone else do the editing for you, or possibly editing and uploading. You can have podcasts produced. Of course, that's an expense. Depends on who you hire. You may be able to hire someone who you don't have to pay as much for one reason or another. Maybe someone or a company that may be charging you less than maybe other companies that may be involved with doing more professional podcasts. So there is a variety as well to consider. A variety of companies that may do these things. So it's not that you just have one choice. I guess what I'm trying to say is that you may have different options depending on who you choose and what you want to accomplish. So essentially, what I'm saying here is that, your planning is so important, and you really need to consider that before you, dive in. I think that'd be best, because if you don't, it's going to end up really being difficult to continue if you just kind of decide I'm just going to jump into this, but then you don't really have a plan of what you're going to do after you've actually started it. And part of the plan, of course, as I said about the naming and frequency and all that good stuff, is also, things like what you're going to talk about. There's your, things like cover art, which is important. That's something that's going to kind of represent your show if you're uploading it particularly to Apple Podcasts and things like that, and you're promoting it. At this point, I think I can mention equipment. As I was saying, right now I'm using my phone, but you can also use your computer. You could also get a microphone. There are, of varying degrees, I'd say, of microphones and equipment, varying amount of costs, particularly that you can get. So it's not necessarily you have to spend top dollar. You can get something decent, $20, $30, and you can go all the way up to over $100 and more. So, depending on what you're getting, what you're using, if you're, getting top of the line, or if you're just getting something that for you will, be functional to help you to get your work out there and sound decent. So there's many different options, and maybe to some degree that could be confusing as well, which is another reason why when I presented this course that I want to mention that there are options. And I gave some examples of the equipment that people could use, some examples of the prices, and just kind of letting them know that, you could spend more, you could have someone else produce it, you don't have to, especially if you just want to see, is this right for you? You don't have to dive all the way in to the deep end of the pool when you're starting out. You can see first if this is the right thing for you. I think that is probably the best thing to do. And particularly when it comes to editing as well, that can be very intimidating. I think that I really didn't have to edit when I first started because of the nature of how I started on Blog Talk Radio. And at the time, people called in, so it was recorded live. So you really didn't have to edit anything in the beginning. But after a while, when I kind of moved on to other platforms and recording and then uploading and then editing became more important thing to do. And then it was like, oh, okay, how do I do this? How can I really use these skills that I don't have as far as editing audio? So that was certainly a learning curve. And again, there's all kinds of software out there. Some much more involved than others. But, as usual, if that's something you think you want to dive into, there is also a ton of YouTube videos out there, which is a lot of things I've relied on when I was starting out and checking on some of the software I was using at the time to see how to use this or how to use that, A lot of it's trial and error, at least it was. Now, as I said, you don't really have to do that if you prefer not to. You can hire someone or some ones to do the editing for you. And the producing, do the whole thing for you. So that, again, is something to consider. But, again, some people may want to dive into that. They may want to try it out. So, I just am putting that out there for you so that you know that, if you think you just want to be hands-on all the way, you can do that. If you'd rather not, then you can do that as well. One thing I think now I was recommending to beginners was to try out, for instance, one of the podcast services or podcast creation services. I'm not really sure how they define themselves particularly these days, but for instance, I was recommending Spotify for podcasters, which, hope that's not something I shouldn't recommend because this podcast is also on Apple. I hope they don't mind that. But I'm not sure if they have a big rivalry at this point, but, maybe it doesn't matter. But they have kind of a one-stop shop from what I'm seeing. I haven't used them like that. This show does go on Spotify, but I don't use their Spotify for podcasters. And that's a place that you can also record and upload and kind of do everything in one spot instead of having different things. As you wouldn't necessarily have to record on your phone, then upload it here. I mean, you could, but I believe that you could do it all in that one place. So if you're starting out, that could be something to consider. You may not really want to go through all this. And you're like, okay, I just want this one place that I can do it all. And, that's something that I was recommending to people who may not really want to have to add all these different tools to their toolkit. They're writing, they're working, they're doing this, that, and the other. They may not really want to dive into all that. So that's, one of the things that I have suggested and gone through pros and cons in the course. I give more details about that. Also, for instance, I upload my files to Libsyn, not sure which is the best way to pronounce that. But they distribute your podcast to a bunch of different podcast platforms. So this is how I get my podcast into Apple. I get it on the YouTube, and I get into all these different places as I go there and upload it. So that's something else to consider as well. I think that if you don't mind doing your recording, you're like, well, I don't mind recording on my phone, or give a microphone or whatever, or if you have a headset or something like that, then that's also something you can use. They have fairly inexpensive pricing for getting a lot of storage for you uploading, and you can just distribute it and don't really have to worry after that. For the most part, you don't have to go to each platform and upload yourself, which certainly makes things easier. And for those authors out there, it may be something that is kind of reminiscent of like, for instance, using something like Draft-to-Digital, which I use to distribute your books to various platforms, like Amazon and B&N and Kobo and such, that you don't really have to go to each place yourself unless you want to. So it's that kind of idea that you don't have to distribute individually to the many platforms. So I go into that, and I go into a couple other platforms that I have used, and a couple of aggregate platforms, aggregate podcast shows. You can kind of get an idea of what they're about if you hear about them, because there are certainly other choices. And for instance, right now I also list Zoom, which people have used. I use it for the most part for recording podcasts. It's probably not always the best to do. Sound quality can be variable depending, I think, on how you're calling in, how you and your guests are calling in. But sometimes it just works for what you need to do it, what you need to work for. Because a lot of times other people will have a Zoom account. They already have it because they're doing other things on there. So it may be kind of, easy to just go on there and host your guests, or if you have various other people who are joining you, that just may be something to consider. So I have also listed that in the course and just kind of given pros and cons of these things, just so you have a sense of what your options are. And I think that helps to just consider, if I'm about getting my podcast out there, these are the different places it could go. Also, YouTube, I think from my understanding, has really put a little bit more emphasis on podcasts than they had necessarily. Could put them up there, which I've been distributing there for quite some time. But now you can kind of designate them as podcasts. So I believe they have put more into, emphasizing podcasts or whatever they're looking to do there. But of course, you can also upload video. You don't have to upload video to YouTube, but you could, of course, because that's kind of the medium that's on YouTube. So that's something else to consider as well, if you distribute there. if you, for instance, record it on Zoom and you also record a video, there may be something you may want to do. Or you may edit the video. Maybe you want to only upload parts of that. Or use it on your website. Use it for your marketing on social media. Maybe you don't necessarily want to just put the whole thing out there in that way. Maybe you just want to put snippets out there. You could really do whatever works. There's not just one way. One way to do it, which I think is really good for those people who just want that flexibility in how they're putting their podcasts out there and what the point is. So I also list some other author podcasts that are out there, just to give an example. You can see what other people are doing. And of course, there are a lot of people doing things that I found, fairly recently, who talk about writing, talk about publishing, talk about, book preparation and editing and all that. So there's also that kind of thing as well. There's people talking about it from other vantage points, not just authors. So there's different ways to use podcasts, different ways for you to put yourself out there. And as far as marketing your, podcasts, you can use your podcast audibles, of course, if you're, you're using Audible or you're using a video as well. But, for instance, if you just have the audio, these are things that you can add snippets of on, social media, if you like. You can use those to promote your particular book or whatever it is you're talking about that time, interview, conversation, however you want to frame it. You can, you don't have to put the whole thing out if you really want to. You could just kind of edit it. And that's something that I have done. One place I've done that is Canva, which really is a great tool for audio and video. And just kind of put together, maybe a few seconds of something and uploaded it to Instagram. And of course, there are people who do podcasts on TikTok. I think for the most part, I have seen video, not necessarily just audio. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I've mostly seen people do videos or just host them on there. But if you're distributing, right now I'm not sure if you can just distribute a podcast on there from somewhere else. I think they kind of prefer that you do things on their app. They kind of want to keep people on the app, which of course all social media really would prefer to keep you on their app. So, that may or may not be something that works for you. But if not, then there's many other platforms that you can distribute to. It's not like, if you don't really want to do that, then there's not other options. But as I said, using Canva is a good way also to use your audio and kind of edit that, use snippets of it, share it up in these different places, and just kind of give people a taste of what's going on. Also, what you could do, Apple does transcripts now, so you can, it's your audio is automatically turned to a transcript. So if you like, that's also something you can do if you're looking to use some snippets of the transcript. Possibly that's something you can put into a graphic or something you're sharing on social media. You can also use image graphics. Let's say using Canva or something, where you just kind of say, there's a new podcast, and here's the title, this is what we're talking about. And of course you can, link that to where people can listen in. Or you can take those transcripts, as I said, take snippets of the transcripts and put a quote or something in a graphic and share that. Or quite possibly post that on your, in your blog, on your website, so that people have these options. Or some people have blog posts that they also have as audios. So a person goes to the website, there's a new blog post about writing, let's say writing and editing or something of that nature. Then, here's the audio for that. You can listen instead of reading if you prefer. So there's different ways to repurpose what you've created. It's not just, I have the podcast and that's it. You can repurpose this content in different ways. Or you can kind of take what you've created, let's say in a blog post or article, whatever, and you can turn that into a podcast episode. There are actually some, I think, AI services that will do that. It will kind of take what you have and kind of, produce a podcast using AI. I know that some people have different feelings about using AI, particularly creatives. So that may be a slightly controversial suggestion for some people to think about using that. I haven't used AI for podcasting, but that is something that I've seen mentioned quite a bit, about people using AI to pretty much do the whole thing, maybe taking from content they created and then turning it into audio and this, that, and the other. Just to say that those options are out there. You don't have to use them if you don't want to, but, for those people who really create a lot of content, I think from their point of view, they feel like, okay, this is something that will help me do this much quicker than I would have done normally. But it's not something you have to do. My only point is that you can repurpose what you've created. You don't have to just say, okay, I've got the podcast out there. Now what? Now what do I do with it? Well, you can keep repurposing information you've already created into podcasts. You can take your podcast and repurpose it into other information. There's a lot of options, which I mentioned in the course. So, of course, I mentioned in the course. So you have my suggestions based on things I've done myself over the years of having a podcast. And, just things I think might make it easier for an author who really already has a lot going on and really probably doesn't want to add a whole list of other things that they have to do to just make things more efficient, while at the same time trying out another tool. Another tool for you to promote. Because you never know. It may be something that you find that really works for you. Especially if you enjoy speaking. Maybe you prefer that. Maybe you're tired of trying to, constantly get your graphics out there and reels out there and all this, that, and the other. Maybe works for you. It's like some people I've seen on some, authors I've seen on TikTok who will be on there, seems like every time I'm on there, and I don't always go on there, but I'm seeing them there, on camera, and they're kind of talking about their books or talking about something else. And that's great because that works for them, but it may not work for everybody. Everybody may not have the time. They may not really want to do that. So if you prefer not to, there are other ways. There's not just one way. I think sometimes we kind of get stuck in a rut that we feel like, oh, there's only one way I can promote. There's only one way I can market. If that doesn't work, then what do I do? But thinking outside the box, I think, is what we have to do nowadays. We can't just do the same things over and over and over and over and over and keep hoping one day that they'll work. Maybe we have to add something else. Maybe try something else. Maybe, switch it up a little bit and see if we're reaching people in a different way is helpful. Or maybe we can reach different people. Maybe just make it more entertaining for yourself and for your readers, for other people who, haven't heard of you yet, but are looking for what you have to write or what you're writing and don't know about your books that you have out there or don't know about the book you have coming up. So this is another way to say, hey, here I am and check this out. So that's just, my point about the podcasting. When I presented this originally, some people were like, wow, I thought I'd have to have a lot of equipment, or thought I'd have to spend a lot of money, or, I didn't really understand what I might have to do. And they were, pretty happy to find out that they did have more options than they thought in the beginning. So, that's why I decided to create the course and to share that. And then I, said, wow, I think there's some good stuff here of these courses, and I could share this right now, as I said, in PDF format, because I can ask a couple of authors what they thought about what's a good way to share this information. And, they're really kind of, I guess, enthusiastic, I think that's the right word for it, about putting it into a PDF format where people could just access it online on your device, whatever that is. Also, I have refillable PDFs. So if there's a point where you want to add notes or you want to answer some questions and you're planning, you want to make notes, you can type it right into the PDF, and then you can save that, or you can print that, or you could just print the PDF itself and then write it in. However you think it works best for you. It's not, it's not an either or. It's there for you however it works the best. So once I put that together, I was like, I'm just going to put this out here and just let people know. Okay, now I'm using a podcast to market, these courses that I have been doing for a while. And I'm now, putting out on my own site where I'm going to be, selling these courses in PDF workbook versions. So, yeah, this is an example of how I'm marketing my courses. So, an example of an example. I don't know if that's a good way to call it. But, yeah, that's the point of why, I'm creating this little podcast series to kind of tie into, how you can create a podcast to promote your book. And I guess if you have a creative thing that's not necessarily a book or a fiction, nonfiction, whatever, but you're creative and, you're looking for different ways to market, this is something to consider. If this is a fit for what you're doing, then, you may want to check this out. And as I said, you don't have to do a long-term series. It doesn't have to be open-ended. You could just say, I'm just going to do a few of these and see how it works for me. And if it doesn't work for you, then you go, well, I tried that. And I didn't like it. So I'm going to move on, or I love it and I didn't know I would love it. And I'm going to do some more. It's that kind of thing. I think that a lot of times you don't know until you give it a try. And that's the point of me sharing this right now. But also, I said I have the courses that I have on my website, or there's a link from my website, authordeborahbailey.com. And from there, there's a link for classes. And the URL for the classes, right now I'm putting them on PayHip. It's payhip.com/fiction writing classes. That's all one word. Fiction writing classes. I made it very straightforward and to the point. Very straightforward and to the point. But as he said, if you go to authordeborahbailey.com, click on classes at the top, you'll go right there. And I will have the link in the show notes, so that way you can, check it out from there as well and see what I have available. Right now, I'm probably adding 1 or 2 classes a month because I'm, as I was saying, writers have other things to do. I'm also doing other things. So I don't probably have time to put, the 20 or so classes created over the past few years. So I'm pretty much putting the ones that I have had a lot of people ask me to present and have really, I found have been the more popular ones is where I'm really going to start with to put them out there. So right now, for instance, I have the podcast one, I have a blogging for authors. I'm going to do another podcast to talk about that. And I also have a writing craft course that I just uploaded called Writing the Monster Romance Hero. So I go into some details about how to write Monster Romance Hero, but that also covers the shifter, the cyborg, the vampire. It's, in general, the hero who may be considered a monster, and how the different things that you should look for, and consider when writing him in a romance. And I also have a listing of workshops. So if you or your organization is looking for someone to present for you, I have a free listing of workshops that are available. All of these workshops won't be added to the site because some of them really are much better, like say a webinar or something like that. So leaving those for requests. Some of those I have presented to organizations, but I probably won't be adding them to this site as workbooks. So there'll be a lot more in the listings than you would see on the site. Once I've really added the ones I thought that were the most popular, I was going to put up here. But if it's something you think your organization is interested in, then you can go there and also download that for free. And I will also be adding another well-requested course, Second Chance Romance, which goes into the different types of second chance romances. It's a very popular genre of romance. And kind of defining that and what to look out for, how you can apply it to your writing. As I said, that's been a popular one for me when I presented it. So I thought that would be the next thing that I would add. So that's coming up, hopefully very soon, the next few days or so. But you can check on the website, payhip.com/fiction writing classes, to see if that's up. If not, it will be there soon. And I also have a link there where you can follow for notifications, where once new classes are added, you just kind of get a notification that yes, this is just new stuff here, check it out. It's not a newsletter at this time. That's one more thing I don't think I have time to do for this particular thing right now. So that would just be notification. That's it, if you want to know. Or you could just kind of check back and see what's been added. So as I said, this, starting this little mini series because I want to share this new site with these courses that I've been adding, just to let people know it's out there, and also kind of give us a little overview of these courses that I have shared and will be sharing. And the next one, as I said, will be blogging for authors. I also did one about direct sales for authors, which, last time I taught that about a month ago. It's very popular. Very, very popular. A lot of people are very interested in what I shared. So that, more than likely, I will be adding here too, under my author brand kit section. So if that's something you think you're interested in as an author, looking how to sell direct, that's something that will be coming, and I'll be sharing that. But again, like I said, it's on the list there. So if it's something you're part of a group or organization of writers, then definitely you can check with me possibly about sharing that with your group. And I think that is it for the moment then. Okay, so I didn't want to go on and on with this. I wanted to try to keep it simple. I'm not sure if I managed to do that, because sometimes we start talking and there's so many little things to add. So I really didn't want to go on and on with it. I wanted to kind of keep this kind of brief, nice little overview introduction and the beginning of my little mini-series here. Okay, so in any case, thank you for listening, for joining me. There'll be links in the show notes if you have any questions about these courses or anything like that. You can let me know. And in the meantime, I guess I'll just say I will see you again next time. Bye-bye now.